Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Yesterday I got the idea that I would put the AIs to the test and have them build a PC for me. I made the story up that my daughter needed a new PC and she plays Valorant, Genshin Impact and Battlefield 6. It had to have at least 1 terabyte SSD to have all those games installed. And it had to be below 8,500 krona, and that is around $1,350 US, and that is with taxes and tariffs and shipping. So I set them to the task. I explained to them that it was a competition between them, me, and that I would give them 3 strikes, like that they would be able to make 3 suggestions, and if they did something wrong, something that was dangerous, something that was not correct with price, or they went over budget, that would count as a strike. So that was the criteria of the competition. So I started out with Gemini, and Gemini started out really good, I think, to some extent. It shows a reasonably good CPU. I think you could get it a little cheaper than the price it has. It's a common thing in this. None of the prices they're suggesting are correct at all. So, and then it suggests just a random GPU, either this or that, or a third option for around 1,600 kroner. And around something that is not true can't be used for anything. So this was strike number 1. Also, the RAM and the SSD cannot be bought for these prices either at this point in time. So that was also a strike. But one suggestion, 1 strike. So these 3 things were not it didn't live up to the expectations of a build with these 3 options. In the next option, it narrowed the GPU down to just 5060 Ti, 8 gigabytes, and the price was reasonably correct. And somehow the price for the CPU changed here, but it's still not the correct price because it's 1,200 and something, that the correct price. And it's stuck with a motherboard, and it now shows 32 gigabytes of CL30 DDR5 RAM. And I would like 32 gigabytes of CL30 RAM too for 1,250 kroner, because that is 4,000 or 5,000 Danish kroner if you want a kit like this. And the same goes with the SSD. Even though it's NV3 and it's not the best quality, it's still... I actually think you can get it for this. Let's check. No, yeah, you could. You could actually get it for this. So it was correct anyway. So that was not a strike for this one. But it also changed power supply to the CX 650, which is the lowest I would get. Either CX or the ABN. Or ABBN, they would be the lowest tier. These are bottom C tier power supplies. I wouldn't suggest them for a powerful gaming PC, but for an office PC or something that's just going to play Roblox and something like that, this would be fine, but not for a gaming PC as this. I wouldn't go further down than maybe C plus or at least B tier. And you can get some reasonably good both A and B tiers for a reasonable price, I think. So at least the RAM was incorrect here, but the general idea is good. The quality of the build is reasonable. Also, it has a really good case here. In the third suggestion, it didn't really change anything other than the price. It still suggested we should get 32 gigabytes. It's not available at this price. So after 3 strikes, I linked the build it had here in... Let's go like this. With the prices here, so you could see the price it had, and it was way, way off. And then it changed to the Patriot Viber ones for 1,056, but these are not available either. Let's see. At this price, you can see don't really know. I think it was there yesterday, but I don't think it's here today. I don't know why, but I think this kit, I chose that kit also, but it was a 2-part kit, but I think it's changed somehow. Has been some error in it, and they changed the picture. But this is, I think, what it chose, and it's still not the correct price, far off, actually. Also, I wouldn't pick the NV3 because it's, and now it changed the price, but it's not the correct price here. It was more correct up here. So it's a bit strange where it gets the pricing from, because it was set up that they had to use pricerunner.dk to find the prices, and you could just do a search and find it, but it didn't do that. So yeah, it came in over budget, or almost 500 kroner over budget, and then it was disqualified because it had the chance to actually change it, but it didn't change anything. So it was really, it wasn't way off. It was just 500 kroner off, and reasonably good components, I think. So I wouldn't go with 1 times 16. And if you were to get 2 times 8, it would be, let's see, I think the cheapest ones are Kingston ones. 16, we go 6,000 or 5,600. We go 2 modules. We sort by price, and yeah, the cheapest ones are 700 kroner more expensive than what it suggests it can get it for here. So it was disqualified on the budget. Then we went on to Copilot, and Copilot didn't start off as great as Gemini did. It started with just suggesting an OEM CPU and had no cooler on it. And it suggested the Gigabyte RX 7700 XT, which is not available. It's not in stock anywhere. It doesn't even come up as a listing. There is an XTX available. It's a little bit more expensive. And then it just suggested some random RAM, none in particular, for 300 to 400 kroner, and you can't get RAM for that. It didn't suggest any motherboard or PSU or SSD at this point, but it suggested the mass gaming case here. It comes with only 1 exhaust fan, and I think I wouldn't suggest running with just 1 exhaust fan. And it doesn't have any CPU cooling at this point, so this is a big strike. In the second suggestion, it suggests still keeping the 7700 XT, even though I said that it wasn't available. But now it has a motherboard, and it is a very cheap and not very good motherboard. And it still failed to pick RAM, SSD, and PSU again. This is second time. It did suggest picking an SSD NV2 or the SN570, but these are not available anymore, and especially not for the 400 kroner it suggests it would be. It was way over 10,000 kroner, and it didn't even have all the parts yet. In the third suggestion, it's narrowing it down. It's still keeping the same GPU. It now has a different motherboard. It's a better motherboard, and now it's limited itself to 16 gigabyte of LPX Vengeance RAM. It changed to the Crucial P3, but the Crucial P3 is not available either, and not at 450 kroner. It changed, no, it didn't change. It added a power supply, and it's the Cooler Master MWE Bronze V2, and this is a reasonably good C/B- power supply, and it kept the case. Needless to say, the prices are not realistic at all. So I made the build in Price Runner and linked it to it and asked if it was the final decision, and it could see that it wasn't at all close. So it ended up suggesting a boxed version now. Or it also did that because I told it that there were no cooling, and if it PC would run without a cooler, and it suggested to use the boxed version. First, it actually wanted to use an ID cooler, but it was more expensive than just getting the boxed version, so I suggested it would take the boxed version as one of the strikes. But when we added it all up and put it into Price Runner, it came up at 9,222 kronos. Let's see if it's still that. It's actually a little bit more expensive today. So, and I had to pick. It still kept the same. Actually, it did change. No, it was because it took the. Yeah, it changed the GPU. And you can see here, the 7600 XT is not available anymore. At least not for a reasonable price, and it's more expensive than the 7700 XT if you were to buy it anyway. So I didn't think it made sense to put it in the build when it was more expensive. I don't know if it makes sense. You would pay 500 kroner more for a worse graphics card. So in any way, it failed horribly all the way through. The reasoning of how it built it was way off. Everything was off. I had to hold its hand to even get a CPU cooler, and I don't think I could recommend Copilot to help you with any PC problems at all. Then we went to ChatGPT, and I think it was very clear that ChatGPT uses Reddit a lot, because it sounded a lot like Reddit suggestions, just copied. But the first suggestion it came with was a boxed version of the 5600. And it is a reasonably good suggestion. And it suggested a random 7700 XT with no brand or anything. And it just made degenerate suggestion of other stuff within a price range that is not realistic at all. So you can't get RAM, especially not 32 gigabytes for 600 kroner. So it was not as good as Gemini, but it wasn't as bad as Copilot because it actually had a CPU cooler this time. In the second suggestion, it picked a motherboard, and it was the same motherboard as Copilot, and it chose 2 times 16 crosshair vengeance here. And see, it must be this one it had picked, right? For 2200 kroner. No, it's this one. Yep. Already had it there. This is the final build, by the way. So in the second suggestion, it picked the SN770 1 terabyte, and it's not available anymore. And one has it on back order for 4,000 kroner, and that's almost half the budget. So that wouldn't work. It did pick a reasonably good case, but it's a little bit expensive. As you can see, 650 kroner thereabout. And it picked a Crosshair RME 750 watts. This is a reasonably good B-tier power supply, but it's very expensive for what you get. You can get much better for less money. You can see it's also 650 kroner. It's not way off. I think this is a reasonably pick anyway. But it takes us to the third suggestion it has. It keeps the RAM, and now it goes for the NV3, just like the others. And just like the others, I don't like the NV3 because you don't know what you're getting. You can get a good one, you can get a bad one, and it's not great. So this was in the competition supposed to be the final build, but I did link the build to it, and it was 2,500 kroner over. And I did pick the XFX one here. It still kept the the 7700 XT. So I told it I picked the other one because the one it picked is not available. And then it changed the power supply to the CV650. And this is a power supply I cannot recommend. I think this is bad sign. It picks, this is a hazardous power supply. It's F tier and it's prone to burning out before time, and it can't keep the correct voltages or currents for the GPU. It's not recommended at all to use this. So here I think it's failing a lot. It also changes the case to a much cheaper one to keep the price down. And it changed to the 6700 XT, which is very weird because this 6700 XT is not available either, and it's also over 4,000 kroner. But I told them the last strike, and I linked to the build, and it changed then to the 7600, which is a reasonably good for the budget, I think. And this is the final build it came with. I don't think it succeeded because it picked a hazardous power supply. So that's the thing I get off this. But if we go and keep the RME, we're actually still within budget. So I think I gave it the leeway of keeping the same power supply it had chosen earlier. And I think this is the only one that didn't go over budget, even though we picked a better power supply. So this is the build it ended up with, except it had a much worse power supply, which would fail it. So I don't think any of them really made a proper build that could be recommended. So yeah, I think it shows that AI is lacking a lot in computer knowledge. It can't see prices. It can't, even if you tell them the correct prices, you give them the link, it still can't choose the proper product at the right price. So I don't think you should ever use AI for building computers or computer advice or anything with computers at all, actually. You could ask it about crashes and what to do, but I wouldn't trust anything it says, not after doing this at least. So I think AI is really good if you want to use command prompt commands, like how do I format my C drive, or how do I change for file system, something like that in command prompt, or all that kind of stuff. I think they're really good at. You can also help them install your own local AI. They're also reasonably good at that, but picking out hardware, they're not very good. So I think the winner is between ChatGPT and Gemini. I think Gemini picked a better PC in the end. And I think its reasoning through it all was also better, but Gemini had really hard time picking components at the right price, where ChatGPT was a little better with the prices, but it fell off picking an F tier power supply at the end. Oh, so also if you compare them, I think the Gemini computer is much better, but it's 500 kroner over. It has a better case. It has a reasonable power supply. It has AM5. So I think Gemini did better, but it went over. And so I think the winner must be ChatGPT, even though it has a bad power supply. It would start up and it would run at least for a year, 2 or 3, before it would blow up and ruin all your components. At least some of your components. But probably fry the motherboard first. So that's it. I also made 3 different builds to accompany this competition. And I chose an AM4, an AM5, and an Intel build. So let's start with the AM4. I chose 32 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM. I chose the 9060 XT 8 gigabytes because getting 16 gigabytes or 12 gigabytes in today's market is almost impossible at this budget. We would have to go up a few thousand kroners to get a reasonable budget here. I chose the Chief Tech Vega. It's a reasonably good A-tier power supply. It is non-modular, so the cables are stuck to the power supply. But since we have chosen a case with a compartment where we can hide the cables, I don't think it's a big problem. I chose a case with RGB because it's a reasonable case, and also I paid a little more, not a lot more, for the frozen A620 with RGB. I think it's 20 or 15 kroners more expensive, nothing, but it's a few dollars more. So I chose a better motherboard than the others. It's a reasonably, really good motherboard. And I chose the Western Digital SN7100. This is not a great SSD, but SSDs are not available, so you have to get what you can take what you can get, and this is what you can get. I chose, instead of the 5600X, I did the 5600 non-X. I chose the 5700X, which is a lot better than the 5600. And I stayed within budget anyway. I got a better GPU, I got more and better RAM, I got a better CPU, I got a better power supply, I got a better case, I got a better motherboard. Since they all ended up with the NV3, I also got a better SSD, but NV3 can also be better than this if you're lucky. So I think it's a toss-up with SSD. So I wouldn't say I'm winning in this department. And I also got a much, much better cooler. So same budget, much better, much better. If we compare with the AM5 build, and that was Gemini, right, that had that, it picked a Ryzen 5 7600, and I picked the 7500F. The performance difference between the two are the same. There's no real difference, really. It's like single-digit FPS difference if you measure it in games or benchmark it in games. I got a slightly worse graphics card in the 9060 XT 8 gigabytes. The 5060 Ti 8 gigabytes a little bit better, but not a lot. For some reason, the 5060 Ti 8 gigabytes is not just a 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte with 8 gigabytes. It also performs significantly worse than the 16 gigabyte version, even if it doesn't overflow with the VRAM. I kept the same SSD case, power supply, and everything else, and I picked a cheaper ProRS from ASRock. And since we're not on the 9000 series here, I don't think we should be prone to burning CPUs. It's only the 9000 series, and there's a misconception that it's only the X3D chips that burn, but it's not to do with the X3D chips, it's to do with the 9000 series chips. It's not, because the first CPU I saw that burned was a 9600X, and then I saw a 9700X, and then I saw a lot of the X3D chips after that. But it started out with other chips and not that. So, and we're still within the budget, just about, but we are within the budget. So I think this is a much, much better buy than what you get here. And that takes us to the Intel option. And I think the Intel option is better than both of the others for several reasons. It has a better CPU, and it's better for office work and rendering and everything else. It has a reasonably good motherboard here, and I still kept the same CPU. It has slightly worse RAM, I think. And we can get 32 gigabytes like we could with the AM4. So you could argue that this is better than the Intel because you can get more RAM. But overall performance, if you stick within the RAM limit, this would perform better than the others, I think. There are no way we could get a 12, or we could get a 12 gigabyte, but then we would have to also go with Intel and get the B580. And I have recommended the B580 before, but the fact that Crimson Desert, the new game that just came out, doesn't support it, I think we could see more of that in the future. So I don't think I would recommend that at this point in time. Of course, if you don't want to play Crimson Desert, it would be a reasonably good suggestion. It would be around the same performance as a 5060 non-Ti. It would have a better memory bandwidth, and it would have more VRAM. But I think I would rather recommend a 9060 XT 8 gigabyte than a B580 12 gigabyte. So yeah, I think that's it for my recommendation here. So yeah. And if you want help building your PC or finding hardware for upgrades or anything, don't hesitate to write in the comments or write an email or come on Discord or anything. Just I would happily help. And maybe in the future I would make my own business making PCs, but I think the market right now is not for opening new businesses. So, but I would love to help you build your PC, choose the right power supplies, the right cases, the right coolers or processors, or finding RAM. I prefer it being Danish, but it could also be in any other country. If you can provide a link like Price Runner in your region, I could use that to help you find reasonably good products. And so, yeah, I guess that's it. So thank you guys, and press the like button if you like the content. Subscribe if you want more. Of course, you should turn off the notification bell because no one wants to get notifications all the time. So yeah, that's it, and that's that. So take care of that and spend your money wisely, like always. So see you guys around.